All right, welcome guys. It is that time of the month again, and I have another awesome dev joining me this month, which is the wonderful Mr. Chris Jopper Perkins, and we will be covering the topic of creative / design for this month. So go ahead and say good day, Chris.
Hey everybody, this is exciting. Looking forward to all the questions and hope to give you some good answers this evening. Thanks for listening.
Thank you very much, mate. So we've got a nice turnout tonight, which is great to see. So what we're going to do, we usually start with like 15 minutes of going over developer kind of background and stuff, but you guys know Chris, you know what he does, all the awesome work that him and the team do. So, and plus we had the stream yesterday, which revealed a lot of that, what we've been up to. So I think we'll go straight into the preloaded questions. I'll read those out, and Chris will do his best to answer as many of them as he can, and then we can just go into a free-for-all kind of chat after that to finish off the hour. So...
Sounds good. 15 minutes is a long time. It's a long time to talk about yourself anyway. So
it is a very long time. I'm going to have to start maybe throwing in some unknown facts and things you don't know about devs and...
There you go.
All right, so our first question, again, I'm not going to do names, guys. I'm just going to throw them out there as a general question from everybody. Will there be a way to customize crafted items, a trademark or coat of arms?
That is a great question. A good one to start off the bat, one that I don't feel like I could answer satisfactorily. I can say that we've been having some really great discussions internally with Corey Lefevre. If you are aware of Corey, he's the main dev working on the crafting and harvesting system right now. And we, in the last month or two, have had some really nice conversations about the crafting and harvesting system, specifically crafting and specifically the yields, how they marry with adventuring, and everything from style to just the actual power of the items statistically. And I think most people hopefully are aware of the fact that we feel pretty strongly that for the crafting system to be relevant, it needs to be able to compete with and be on par with the adventuring sphere. I think it's right that, maybe there's fluctuations in that. There are certain level ranges or certain items, certain slots that maybe currently the best you can get is in adventuring, but also there could be situations where the best you get is from crafting. And so having that dance back and forth, I think, is really good. But there's some cool stuff that we're talking about, and that I don't want to say what it is yet, but I can say that it's pretty certain that we're going to be moving forward with it. That is going to allow for a little bit of customizability when it comes to the crafting yields, not just with like a tag or a brand, but also even in kind of the fundamentals of the item. And I want to be really cautious about saying more, because there's a lot of really careful design work that needs to be done to make sure that we don't infringe on one of our tenets, which is how identifiable we want items to be. We want them to have that iconic kind of place and identity in the game. And so if you can introduce all these items in the game that could be all these varying degrees of different statistical layouts, then you start chipping away at that. But I think we found a good path that allows for some of that customizability without ruining that tenet. So I'm excited about that, and be talking more about that in the future.
That is awesome, man. I'm sure that's a lot more information than I expected, so thank you. And I've got Corey coming up too in a couple of months. We're going to go to another crafting roundtable with Corey, who's very eager to jump back in, so I know you guys will
great.
Be looking forward to
That'll be awesome.
All right, so moving on to the next one. This is a little bit in depth, so we'll see what we can do with that. He references the FAQ, the game tenets, as well, about situational gear and stuff, but the question is, can we share our thoughts on why we feel that avoiding level requirements on gear creates much more of a vibrant and open player driven economy, and how does our decision delay or minimize item value deflation. So it's a little bit technical, but I think he's referencing our FAQ, game tenant, and Pantheon difference kind of tenants and posts to see how we feel situational view kind of is different and why we avoid level requirements.
Okay. Cool. I've got this one pulled up, I believe, in the thread. So I'm just kind of looking over a little bit here to make sure I understand the question fully.
Yeah, cool.
Okay, so first of all, why are we avoiding level requirements on gear? So to rephrase that would be, why are we not saying you have to be a particular level before you can equip something? Why are we leaving that open? At least the first part of the question is a little bit more philosophical. So I think to one degree, it speaks to the openness of just the game in general. If you think of a game kind of existing along a line of open or not open, or you could say free versus constrained, there are a lot of little decisions that add up along the way, and the more that we decide to decide for the player, the more that we control and constrain, the more those decisions along the way add up to end up creating a more or less open kind of experience. And by open, just mean free, where you're kind of more or less free to do with things within the game as you please. And that is a very deep and broad conversation. Where it specifically intersects itemization is kind of we tend to lean more towards, in that environment or in that aspect of the game, that's one of the spheres that we like being more open. And there's some good reason for that. Number one is because we have plans for items, and this is definitely gonna be a tease because I can't. There's just nothing I can say about this. But we have plans for items that do make it a choice, make it a really make it a very important choice. So let's say you're level 40 and you've been using this really awesome weapon that you got around level 30, and you've been using it for the last 10 levels. It was crazy that you got it at level 30. It totally revolutionized your performance in combat. It's just has been phenomenal. But you're level 40 now, and maybe you hit on something, maybe you did a round 2 and you found something that was just as awesome at level 40, and it ended up being, in some senses, a replacement for what you had. And you now have to decide what to do with that. It's not going to be soul bound because we're not doing that. But then if you had a level requirement on it that was a level 30 required or above, then right out of the gate, you're limited in what you can do with it in terms of, giving it to another character of your own, an alt. Or once we get more into the progeny system, is there something to be said about passing down an item that you've used personally as the father or the mother, let's say, of the character, the progeny character that comes after. And maybe there's even like some, the longer you've used that weapon, maybe that even has an effect on what state it ends up going down to the character that comes after. That's all I'll say about that. But the other side of it is, if you have a really meaningful choice between, am I going to sell this because it's not soul bound, so I'm going to sell it, then you have a broader range of people you can sell it to. Am I going to pass it down to an alt character or something within the progeny system? Am I going to, am I going to try and, do maybe a quest with it, or and this other thing that I'm dancing around because I don't want to say anything about it yet, but if there's something really, really meaningful that you could do with that item versus just passing it down, then it makes it more of a legitimate decision where you've got really, really enticing things on both sides. And so I would rather there be a situation like that where there's still openness, there's freedom, but you have a choice to make versus just slapping a tag on something and saying, sorry, you can't even think about interacting with this until you're level 30, period. So that's more the philosophical side of it. Not, totally exhaustive of an answer, but I don't really want to get into the item value deflation because that's a really important topic, and I'm not deflecting it because to say that it's not important, but it's just it would take a lot of time to kind of unpack some of that, and that's something maybe that better suited for like a post or something. We can go in more detail.
Absolutely.
And then what about the situational gear? How would you phrase that question?
So I think it's more about the swapping out, isn't it? So like,
is it more about than the swapping out? What do you mean? Oh, like just changing gear. Is that what the question is? Like, how does it?
So I think like
look back.
how that reinforces the situational in gear. Like, how is that different? Like, I believe.
Okay, how does it reinforce the situational gear differentiator? I'm looking at it again now.
Yeah. So I'm reading the words, but my coffee isn't allowing me to get that question in my head sit in the right way.
No worries. I'm just processing it here. I find it interesting that
I think like situational gear. So obviously, there's no level requirement for any of the gear. So how does that reinforce situational gear? I don't think it really matters. I think it kind of plays into it as in like any situational gear is going to be there for the taking, no matter what level, if you can come across it. But isn't there going to be something where if you get like a really high level epic and you're a level 1, you can wear it, but I don't think you're going to be able to use it to its full potential.
Right. Well, and that's the other thing to say. We've talked a little bit about how items will, I hate to use the word scale because it's there's just a lot of connotation to that, and it's been done a lot of different ways. But I think I mentioned in the Tyler the Reckless Magician stream that the scaling is going to be based on your skill, your proficiency in a given thing. So whether that's an armor, a piece of armor that's maybe based on some amount of your defensive skill and your armor proficiency, or whether it's obviously a weapon which is keying off of your that particular weapon skill, like how high is your one-handed sword or how high is your two-handed blunt skill. That's gonna play a lot into the effectiveness of particular items based on the level that you are, more so than just the stats like kind of artificially deflating. So yeah, I mean, if you get this crazy awesome weapon that has like 40 damage and gives you 10 strength and 6 stamina or something like that, you're gonna feel the strength increase, you're gonna feel the stamina increase, you're gonna obviously be doing more damage. But if you're level 1 and your one-handed sword skill is like 5, then that's going to have a pretty big effect on what actually comes out the other end when you swing that. But there are benefits certainly that you can enjoy from the stat boosts, and some being more directly additive, like something like stamina or something like that. But yeah, the situational gear thing, it's I don't know that it necessarily, at least as I'm sitting here thinking about right now, I'm not seeing like a direct relationship between reinforcing that versus just kind of the sense that without the level requirements, there's going to be a broader variety of items that you're going to be able to pull from to use in various cases at the lower end, which, because climates and atmospheres and things like that are going to be we want those things to be introduced early as we can into the life of a character as far as things that they experience. Then the more items like that are available to characters, the better. But again, even in that, like something like climate and atmosphere, the gear that you wear is only going to go so far. It's not to use climate as a specific example. The acclimation system is made up of several different layers. It's the actual like glyphs that you use to acclimate to a particular climate. It's also obviously things like abilities and magical effects. There's the whole exposure element, which gives you a certain amount of boost to a particular climate the longer you are in that climate. You've got racial passives feeding into that in some certain cases, and then you've also got the equipment layer. So it's not like you're going to see a level 50 item with some kind of acclimation bonus on it passed down to a level 1, and then all of a sudden they can run around in the highest tier climates. That's not how it's going to work. So we're aware of the openness of not having level requirements, but and we're also then being aware of that, working into all of our different designs to make sure that it's not going to allow too much of a trivialization of any kind of content when that's happening. So I mean, the simple way to say it is we are fans of twinking in general, but we also don't necessarily want it to go so far that you're just totally trivializing content for that character that you've twinked.
Massively overpowered at level 1, steamrolling content all the way up to 20 is not on our list of things we want them to be able to accomplish.
Right.
That's well said, man. I think, yeah. He did a follow-up question in there, but you pretty much nailed it. So I think we can move on.
Okay, cool.
This will be a nice specific one for you, nice and easy. Are there any creative decisions that have really stood out for you and or have drastically changed the world and the way players interact with it? Any kind of like brain snap moments where you thought, wow, this is actually big?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think in a lot of the behind the design articles I've written over the last months, I could say that about all of those systems. I mean, when the perception light bulb went off, when the climate atmosphere light bulb went off, like when the disposition light bulb went off, like these were moments where, if you have all of these kind of different things, ideas, thoughts swimming around in your mind, and often they don't seem to have any connectivity with each other. And then the moment happens where all of a sudden it all kind of coalesces, and you're just sitting there just so excited and just kind of it's hard to describe. I mean, it's an amazing moment, especially, and there's been a lot of ideas that come around that way that, almost immediately get kind of self-rejected, or, we do like anytime we do like socializing where, an idea, well, I mean, I remember with with dispositions, with perception, with climate acclimation, with this one I'm reaching for, I'm not thinking of, but in all those cases, I would I brought that idea to the table and had fleshed it out as much as I either wanted to up until that point, or where I feel like I had gone far enough to say, okay, there's a clear implementation path here, but it's also that socialization too, where other minds come sit down, look at it, chew on it, push back. There's that kind of offensive and defensive movement where you're defending an idea but you're also scrutinizing it and appreciating it being scrutinized. And sometimes it doesn't even make it that far for certain ideas that have come along that I've had, other people the same. But when it's an idea that really becomes that's really sticky, and that really becomes, especially in those cases, part of like real defining factors of the game, then those are the ones I would immediately point to and say, like, that's just an amazing experience. And then being able to see them come along and continue to take shape, and that's an ongoing part of the experience that I'm enjoying so much. But that's also a huge, I'm a very I try to see things very, well, what's the best way to put this? I can be very, very critical, like not in like a, I guess in like a negative way, but like it's hard for me to really get on board, even if it's an idea that I've had personally, with it actually being good. And we've seen so many things from MMOs over so many years that you just can't allow yourself to think or assume that something's going to be good just because you're excited about it, or even an idea that looks good on paper, that it's actually going to play out once it's implemented and be enjoyable. And so that's the other side, is that there's this constant sense of, even if we've decided to run with an idea, the idea is only part of it. I mean, it's like the whole creative process. You have the first half of it is like a light in the dark. Like that's the moment where the idea comes to you, it coalesces and you can see the path in the dark for the first time. But the whole other half, and arguably the more important half, is actually walking that path and figuring out, yeah, this is going to work or it's not. This isn't as cool as I thought it was. Or, man, I had no idea there were this many edge cases that come along to threaten the validity of this idea. And that's really what design shakes down to be at the end of the day, is taking ideas and working them through the sieve, through the filter of like actual reality implementation, and really coming to the place where you can say, yeah, this is good. Like this is good. And we're still very much on that journey with our systems. That's a big part of what Project Fairtail is we need to be able to prove these systems out so far to the point where, I say it all the time internally, like Project Fairtail is about showing, not telling. Like that's the point of Project Fairtail, is getting Pantheon to the point where we don't have to be there saying, no, it's like this now, but eventually, where it's going, it's that it's just there. Like you're just seeing it, you're experiencing it as it's happening. And it's a really exciting, very validating part of the development journey to be on right now where we're at. So pretty excited about that.
Well said, mate. And I can kind of vouch for that from a lesser point of view. Even just hearing some of the early ideas that haven't quite made it, and when we get told, this is internal, let's keep it to ourselves, brainstorm. Have you got any thoughts on this kind of thing? And I know that you guys have already done so much hard work filtering it through to even the rest of the team to put input on. And just hearing some of those ideas and the passion behind them is so exciting. Like I love logging in to read that stuff. So hat off to you guys. I can't even imagine how hard it is to get through that first part with all your ideas and these little babies you nurture to then get brutalized as they come through the sieve.
It's a hard but very, very important part of the process.
Absolutely. And a follow-up quick question, if we can answer it, from the same person is, will each race have distinctive cuisines, like different provisioning recipes?
Yeah, well, that really flows right into that, right?
Yeah, connected easily.
That is a good question, and I would say yes, because I just, from my MMO upbringing, I couldn't imagine it any other way. Yeah. Well, I saw that question before this, and I was instantly thinking, man, I don't know if I can talk about any of those things, because either they are, I guess not either, but my concern would be if they are things that we decide to circle back on later. I don't even want to give it away. Like I don't want to put any of the secret sauce out there, because where my mind goes are ideas that are actually really valid, that I'm super excited about, that we've either shelved because it's not feasible, to do by launch or in the launched game, or it's something that we intentionally want to wait for a little while post-launch before, rolling something like that out. I'm trying to think if there are any ideas that were just tossed because they were just bad,
While you're thinking quickly, I had myself muted for that question for the actual recording of it, so I'll just repeat it quickly. So people who would have heard a silence for about 10 seconds. So it was, what is one creative idea that was in the wish list for the team that will not be implemented or was shelved? That was perhaps a hot topic during any particular period of internal discussion. So something that we thought was a great idea that just didn't quite make it through the sieve.
Yeah. And do you want me to give my response to that again?
If you just abbreviate it, if you can, man.
Yeah, abbreviate it. So basically, I don't want to share anything that we have plans to circle back on and actually implement later. That's the abbreviated version. And but now I'm trying to think if there's anything that was shelved or cut because it was just flat out bad. And then I would feel bad.
Yeah, that's right.
Throwing that out there.
And there's stuff, as you said, we may still implement or may still kind of tweak or adjust to our needs later on and bring it back. So it's kind of hard to say if something's completely dead.
Yeah. So I'll just say there have been ideas that have been cut, and there are ideas that have been shelved for a later purpose.
Perfect. All right, we'll leave it there. Lots of... Where are we? Okay, so do you envision zones occurring periodically in the game, like taking AVP, for example, raids on the human town from either BRK or the Orcs, where players can gather resources to bolster the town defenses, walls, like watch or archer towers. Others can craft gear and weapons to upgrade the militia, or thrown fast ties of the forces of evil and others, and offers bounties to clear out bandits or orcs. So I think, like, is there going to be is this like world events or kind of, live events where something could happen?
Yeah. I want to be careful with this one because this is the kind of question where it's easy to just speak out of like, this is what we would love to do and what we think would be cool versus what is actually, feasible. So, yes, when it comes to events and in-game events that are happening, not like GM-led events, but actual like events that happen periodically in the game world, where there's maybe, local conflict between this group of NPCs and a village or outpost or even a city, or, I can think of like different times of day. Maybe there's something that comes out only at night and wreaks havoc and causes terror and then, slips away as the sun rises. Like, the answer is yes to both of those things. Where the I guess the push comes is how deep, how like textured and layered can those things be. And I would say we want to be conservative with how deep we try to take those kinds of things. I think what we absolutely want to achieve is the sense that the world is dynamic, meaning we want there to be a reasonable expectation as you travel through areas and then come back a few days later, or the rhythm with which you move throughout the world, that you would expect things to not be static, that there would be events and things happening that make the environment, the imprint of the NPCs and the factions and what's going on in that area different from time to time. Some things will be more consistent. So, I'm thinking of an area in Avendir's Pass right now, or an event, a nighttime event that happens in Avendir's Pass that, as we've discussed it internally, it's more of a consistent rhythmic kind of thing from night to night. But even in that, there would be a few, potential kind of discrepancies in how everything plays out. But you'll have things a little more common like that, but then there are also the things that are more rare, the kind of events that can happen that you would count yourself kind of lucky, to stumble upon. And that ties into, some things that I'm super excited to talk about and can't. Man, I can't wait till that day comes where I don't have to say that about anything else. But there are going to, we're really serious about how exploration and discovery is like one of the heartbeats of the game. And for that to actually play out, we can't just say it. We can't just make a big world and say it's important to travel, it's meaningful. And that's because you just have to run around to get from place to place. But we want to make sure that we're incorporating design and systems and mechanics, even that not just make it interesting, but are actually really exciting and rewarding for players to, in some cases, really just be in the right place at the right time. Like we're used to in these games, like the acquisition mechanic being very much about grinding and how many hours you spend, camping this mob or running, this dungeon, or, just sitting there flat out waiting for something to spawn. But there's this sense that like everything is attainable if you put in enough time. Everything is attainable if you grind for it hard enough, long enough. And I'm really interested in this kind of layer of like, what would it be like, if there were certain things in the game that were the acquisition method of those things was actually being in the right place at the right time, literally. And then you would get these, I mean, I'm not going to say any more than that. I've probably said too much anyway, but that element of the dynamic nature of the world, where there really are manifold reasons to move around and to explore. And, that kind of, not so much that there's that like fear of missing out. Like I don't feel like I can just sit and, be in this area, because that's cool too. But just that sense of moving around the world, it's got to feel exciting. It's got to feel like brimming with potential. So maybe that's enough said.
Yeah, absolutely. Like rewarding that exploration, that curiosity, I think is a good thing. And it's periodically too. It's not, going to happen every 10 seconds, but if you're out in the world discovering and enjoying all the content there is to see, and something just crazy happens, then it's going to be an experience for those people involved. They're going to tell others, and that should, promote kind of getting out and having a look around.
Yeah.
Great stuff, man. All right, so next question. Is there still room for creative brainstorming, or is the team so focused on implementation that any new grand imaginings must be held in check? Please elaborate, if possible, on mechanic systems that allow you some flexibility.
These are good questions.
They're tough, man. I give these guys a week to think of these, and they don't muck around. They hit us with some hard ones.
That's good, though. That's good. These are great. Is there still room for creative brainstorming? We'll start with that piece. Yes, absolutely. And the reason is because, for one thing, implementation requires a massive amount of creative brainstorming. There's the initial idea that forms. Sometimes it doesn't even take creative brainstorming to come up with something. It just pops into your head one day. You're like, taking the dog out, or you're driving to somewhere, and it's like all of a sudden things just form, and you're like, oh, I've got to stop what I'm doing right now and write this down. But the hard work of design is actually in implementation. It's not even only with the design side, like making sure the ideas actually get manifested. It's also in being able to work with the whole programmatic side of things to say, okay, here are our limitations. The mind is able to come up with such an amazing landscape of ideas, but how those ideas go through the process of being constrained and then kind of working themselves out into an experienceable system is really, really tough sometimes. The amount of creative brainstorming that goes on. So yes, in that sense. In another sense, yes, and I would say like the design, Pantheon's design canon is not closed all the way. There are still ideas that are deeply resonant with the team and with what as we look at, the end result of what Pantheon is, that we say, yeah, that's got to get in there. Like, that's got to be in there. That's a real huge part. And some of that we'll be able to talk more about, in the coming months, as especially once we get to like Project Fairtail release and we're able to actually talk about the tangible content that's there. And there are still a couple of ideas that that's the other piece of it too, is like it's so easy to design yourself into a kind of an end product that you're incapable of actually producing. And so that's a lot of the challenge too on the creative and the design side of things, is making sure that like the systems that really make the cut, the stuff that really, really does work its way all the way through and make it into the end when it gets into your hands, those decisions have to be made very, very carefully. And sometimes you're as I've heard like Justin Gerhardt say, it really is sometimes your sweethearts that are on the chopping block. And for the greater good, there has to be a really, really honest process. So yeah, it's I'm kind of getting off in the weeds here, but there is still creative brainstorming going on. There's still room for that. We are extremely focused on implementation right now, because that's the key. I think the world at large is just as tired of hearing us talk about the things we want to do as we are. And so a lot of the focus right now is on purely implementation, getting these things into the game and fleshing it out until it's actually what it is meant to be. And then, yeah, there's definitely a keeping in check the grand imaginings that flow from time to time from every which way. So
that's perfect, man. And yeah, as we said, as you guys said in the stream yesterday as well, is something that the team shares the sentiment of greatly, is, we're getting to the point now where we're doing less saying and more showing. So as we approach that stage and start showing more and more, I think the community is gonna love that as much as we will.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
All right, so we've got about 20 odd minutes left. We've got a couple more questions here to finish up, and then we'll open it up. But the next one goes on: can we expect you to make all more awesome music in coming expansions, and might VIP or a special pledge include your Pantheon music in some way? It's actually a very interesting idea.
Yeah, we've kicked things like that around internally, like everything from the music to the lore and the work that Justin's done, and then certainly obviously a lot of the concept art images, like putting those together into compendiums that can be the players can actually get their hands on tangibly. The music question, it is I was actually just walking Mary. If you saw the stream yesterday, Mary is a new member of the team, was on the stream and was getting some time in game with her and Tim, just to kind of go over some stuff about the Enchanter, and was telling her my story as she's learning, everybody's story on the team, about how we came to be a part of it. And most people know that music was the thing that I did at first, the music composition, and it's such a ridiculous story too. I'm not going to get into it now, but it's really amazing the path that all that ended up taking. But as it stands now, like I want the music for Pantheon to be awesome, and for the music for Pantheon to be awesome, it needs a dedicated touch. It needs someone who can just completely give themselves to hearing and seeing and creating that entire soundscape. And I can't do that. I can't do creative direction and all that entails, and then do the music justice. And so I think while there may be additional pieces that I write along the way, because I love doing it, and sometimes you just can't help but sit down and have to get music out, having a dedicated composer, somebody who could really do that well, and someone that the team really believes in, and able to hear music and instantly know like, yeah, this is it. We're going to need that. So we're exploring a few options right now that may or may not materialize, but that are really exciting. And I can't wait for more music just to get in general, because the game needs it.
Yeah, man. And look, in your earlier work was absolutely fantastic. But as you said, it's a big job. It's what you're doing now is a massive job, and
it's huge.
The music is a just as big job. So, yeah, putting on multiple hats for that would be, I think, a challenge for any kind of Superman, let alone mere mortal.
Absolutely.
Okay, so we've got a couple more left. We've got about 20 minutes. We'll try and quickly touch on these last 3 questions, and then we'll open it up. So we've got a bit of time for the guys to throw us some live questions. So this one's more about, over the years, there has been a lot of community debate around farming, competition, and the player behaviour that results. While many of us want an open world experience, we're also weary of reintroducing some of the social problems that can occur when everything is a free-for-all. What are some of the mechanics or mechanisms that Pantheon will use to try and hit the middle ground between having things be heavily contested or completely isolated? Things like triggers, dynamic spawns, stuff like that. That's actually a really great question.
It is a great question, and it pains me deeply to not be able to answer it directly. I don't exaggerate by saying that this question, and if I'm understanding the question correctly, I think what I'm hearing is, you guys tout often that Pantheon is an open world, non-instance game, and you lead with that sometimes as like a real differentiator, because it is. I mean, it's not the common way anymore, and that's great. But what it does is it introduces a real question, a real concern, which is, how do you plan on handling the fact that in an open world, targets are contested? And what do you do to keep individual players, much less full guilds, from kind of blocking or owning essentially content where that might keep players from being able to to access it as freely as they would if it was in an instanced environment. And we have things like the closing door in Ashra that we saw yesterday that Ben spoke to a little bit, and people see that, and yeah, it's one piece. It's one thing that we want to try and see kind of what that ends up doing. But we also are very aware that alone, of course, is not, it's not a solution by any means. So to get back to the creative brainstorming, it is probably in the top 3, if not the number 1 most important question in my mind to answer, because if we can't solve that, then we've based our entire project around an aspect that will could potentially be our undoing. If we don't have a way to actually solve for that. I think we have a way to solve for it, and it's I'm using an incredible amount of constraint right now not to say anything about it, because it's really exciting. You talk about like the creative kind of chopping block / like storm center of having an idea, and something like this. I mean, if there's ever an idea that needs an unbelievable amount of vetting and turning it over in your mind and looking at every single possible facet you can think of, what are all of the edge cases? This idea has gone through it and is continuing to go through it. I'll just call it an idea for now. Yeah. It does have a name. It has a shape. It has a design doc around it. I've been able to socialize it with a few key people on the team, with Brad as well, and just kind of let it fall out there and start being like chewed on. And so far, I think the vetting has worked, and there's not really a whole lot of edge cases that we're needing to solve for. So I really think we are very close now to being able to say we actually do have a plan to address this, and it's not piecemeal, it's not gimmicky, it's actually a very significant part of the game. And I can't wait till we can say more.
Absolutely, man. And I think this question flows nicely into that, which was, it was great to see from the stream yesterday that the boss, Nashura, has some pseudo instance lockouts, as in the rock door, the boulder that comes down whenever the boss is aggroed. They love this approach, and can we expect to see more of this pseudo instancing for other dungeons/instances?
That is a good question. And again, like I said, the whole idea with the door mechanic, it is not a catch-all. It's not anything that, a group could just as easily, go in before the door closes, or, it's you could have multiple groups run at the same time. It's not really a solution as much as it's really meant to be just as much a part of just the mechanic, where if you enter that room, if you engage him, you're there. Like there's no getting out. If you don't survive, you don't survive. You can't run to zone line with this one, but it also serves as kind of a way to at least keep a group or the encounter from being interrupted by someone coming in after. So yeah, I don't, there shouldn't be so much emphasis put on that, as if it's like, meant to be how we're solving for that, as much as it's just one piece, one way that, as it is actually related to the encounter itself, it also, can help alleviate some of that, contesting that can happen, if people are able just to freely access it all throughout the fight.
Yeah, well said. Okay, so finishing up on the last question before we open it up, guys. When we open it up for the last 10 minutes, we'll do some quick fire questions, so we won't spend too long answering. We'll try to get as many as we can with just very simple, basic answers. After going into so much detail for these ones, but we will save a little bit of time for that. So last question, are there any plans for allowing AFK activities such as fishing or processing materials? I feel this is very important for those who have limited time.
That's a good question. You see that a lot in kind of the current mobile game paradigms, where you can actively play and arguably, progress much faster, or you can, there's certain systems where you can, make progress while you're not playing, in active play, I guess. So I think, obviously we're not planning on embracing that fully, but I think there's something to be said about potentially exploring some things like that, finding the aspects of the game that, if to one of the things I did in EQ, I'm sure many people did this, is I would, get in the water, start swimming into a wall on auto run, and just go to bed.
Yes.
Wake up and my swim skills maxed. Things like that. Like that's kind of how players figure out ways to do things like that, or, binding since heading to the movement keys. So every time you turn or move, like you're using the ability kind of thing. So we're not planning on automating skill ups, obviously, like that, but there could be certain systems that that's worth exploring. So it's a good question.
And just to follow up and finish, there was a second question which I can answer quickly. They love the spell combat effects, and the fact that they have buffs, debuffs are clearly marked. Will those who have lower quality graphics have the option of hiding non-essential effects, yet still see the markings? I believe we will. We're going to have various options. Our technical director, Daniel Karen, and Rob and a few other guys in the team are looking into that, and they are doing a wide range of resolutions, graphical settings and things like that. So when we do release, you will be able to adjust it to your computer's needs. But also, in saying that, Pantheon isn't going to be a hugely graphically intensive game, but if you have a beast of a system, you will be able to crank it up and make the world look beautiful. And if you have a potato, you can lower them to still run a smooth game and have, as close to 60 FPS as possible and still see important markings and effects and stuff like that. So yes, you should be able to do that. And that concludes the marked questions. So look, we've got about 10 minutes. We started a couple of minutes late, so I'll give us 10. We'll try to keep roughly a minute or two to a question so we can get 5 to 10 out. But if you guys have any extra questions you want to put in chat, please do that now, and tag my name please, or Jopper's name, so we can see them highlight, and we'll try to answer them for you guys. I've got a quick question here that came through in a message earlier that was on rare abilities. There is a stated intent that some ability spells will need to be sought out from the world, since this will increase the variety of the ability sets for a given class, and hence reduce cookie cutterness for what classes bring to the table. So basically they're asking, to what degree do the team see this taking? In other words, will these account for a small or more significant portion of abilities as you move up in levels? So basically, how many of these rare skills are going to be out in the world compared to conventional skills?
Nice. Good question. It's kind of hard to quantify, and it won't be exactly the same from class to class, but I think you could expect probably somewhere around 30 to 40% of your class abilities would be gathered that way. And there's probably some weighting to put into that in terms of, like, if it's 30%, let's say, then it doesn't mean that that's a uniform percentage. It may mean that it's more weighted to the higher level, where, as you get up in level up to, level 20, 30, something like that, maybe the majority of your abilities do come from kind of the traditional method of, buying the scrolls or things that are readily available, with a sprinkling of, special abilities that you have to discover. But then the higher level you get, the more epic and, real class defining, kind of that whole iconic epic ability, that percentage will start to weight more heavily in terms of how many of those abilities you have to find before you can incorporate them.
Yeah, nice. So for fun, what are Jopper's and Kilson's favorite classes to play so far?
You go first, man.
All right. So mine's a rogue. Is a rogue. It always is some kind of rogue in any game. But I have a secret love for healers. So I love shaman, and only because clerics are so popular because they're the pure healers, and I've always found shaman to be a little bit more technical and challenging. And so I don't know why I've just been drawn to the shaman class as a healer. And I also play a tank. I also love having a tank of some sort, and again, I always pick the harder one, or something that's a little bit more complicated, like a Dire Lord or a Dread Knight in Vanguard, or something like that. For the simple fact that warriors and paladins are always picked first, and I like just being a little bit different. And I think, I don't know, a bit of a masochist. I think I like making life hard for myself, and love that challenge. So I will always get one DPS, one healer, and one tank in that order up to max level, and I will play them regularly as needed in groups, but my rogue will be the number one pick for anything I do for raiding and all that kind of stuff. And then as needed, I'll jump into the other classes.
Nice, man. That's much more structured than my approach. The cleric is my kind of where my heart is in terms of just pure player. I love playing clerics. I really enjoy healing classes. I think my favorite character in any game to date was my holy paladin in World of Warcraft at the height of the Wrath of the Lich King expansion, raiding Naxxramas. That was probably my favorite favorite class experience, and it's really marked me in terms of like just what I really love about healing. But then of course, there's been so many other healing classes and different designs and whatnot. And healing is just I love to heal. And so it's been really fun designing the healing classes and kind of really stretching and kind of flexing that paradigm with everything that we've seen before. And then, what are potentially new things we could do. And so for sure, but I mean, I play pretty much every class. I really love the Bard from EQ. Spent a lot of time playing that class, and it's a very iconic class in my mind. And I'm really excited about the Ranger and the Monk. I love monks as well. Tanking, I love tanking. I don't like playing tanks as much, but I know them intimately because I've healed for so long. And so I know how tanks work and how they think and what they do and what they shouldn't do and all the things that a healer knows so well.
Yes.
So it's an interesting perspective on all the different classes, and it's been a blast working on them.
All right, so we'll do quick fire yes or no, or as short as answer as we can for the next few, just while we finish up. So nice lightning strikes. Will druids be able to affect it?
Yes.
Awesome. So very briefly, can Joppa clarify whether the 24-man raid limit he mentioned in a previous stream is intended as part of balancing encounter design challenge? And he said Vanguard comes to mind, or if it's because of engine limitations with Unity.
It is not because of engine limitations. I'll say that.
Okay.
And yes, it's part of balancing encounter designs, but we're open to expanding that raid size on an encounter to encounter basis as we move along. In that there may be clarify what I mean by that. Like there may be certain encounters where we exceed that limit in terms of just how many players are actually necessary to take the thing down. But the 24 person point is not a system limitation. It's our goal, kind of designing our raid encounters around at the moment.
It's a nice balance. 4 groups of 6 is easy for not easy, but it's more manageable for the devs to balance. It's also more manageable for guilds to get together, even random pug pickup groups. It's a nice number to work with. But we're not going to lock ourselves to that. We'll go with whatever we feels right.
Yep.
Will day-night cycles have an effect in regards to random spawns? We have answered this, yes. We will have instances where at night some certain things happen that wouldn't happen during the day, and vice versa. Speaking of the acclimatation glyphs, is there any way that those exist visually on the character and each glyph has a unique style?
I would love for that to be the case, because they essentially are meant to be like inscriptions or like these kind of magical writings and markings that remove themselves from the surface that they're on naturally and apply themselves to the player in a physical marking kind of way. So if there is a way to visually represent that, you better believe we're going to go for it.
Nice. Are enchanted charmed pets going to be weakened at all, or will some other system be used to offset the power of the charmed mob aside from random charm breaks? Please don't nerf mob damage. So essentially, if you get a powerful mob, let's just say like an alpha pack wolf or something out in the wild, and you are somehow able to charm it, that wolf is going to be devastating to use against other things. Is there going to be anything in place to limit that wolf's power, or will there be an effect breaking, like every couple of ticks there'll be a chance to break, or what?
Yeah, there's kind of 2 different schools here. One that says don't nerf mob power, nerf charm duration, and the other that says don't nerf charm duration, nerf mob power. I don't really like nerfing charms duration so much. I don't like putting the burden on that. But what I like even more is finding ways to do both, like to not do both. neither nerf the mob's power or the duration. And in the case of Charm, I think it's what I would like to explore, at least first, is a way to grow up into a more and more powerful charm, where by the time you are, kind of a master enchanter, then you've kind of like what you would think with like reses. Like the first res you get gives no experience back. The next res is like 20-something%. The next res is 50, all the way up to like basically it's pretty much the whole thing. That's something I'd like to explore with Enchanter Charm, is growing in its potency to where you not only increase in duration and hold power, but you're getting a more true kind of mob power out of what you've charmed, which is also to say, yes, that there will be at the lower levels a pretty substantial reduction. I don't know what that is. That could be all the way to like 50%, or maybe it's not that severe, but that'll come just through testing and balancing things out.
Good stuff. All right, so one more question each. I'll take the first one. I'll give you the second one to finish up. So this one comes from Evorus. How many of the team are Bard advocates, and do they outnumber Team Necro? And I think Joppa will agree with me when we've decided to merge them together into a Necrard. I think we spoke about this last time. So we're gonna
a Necrard?
A Necrard, the one class merge, just to make life easier.
An ugly name.
Isn't it what? And the last question to finish up will be from Hyde. Will we see any abilities showcasing dual targeting besides tank rescues? I don't think I've seen any in the ability lists or on the website or within the pre-alpha besides rescues.
Yes. I'm thinking in particular of the well, no, I can't spoil that one yet. Sorry. Yes, I have actual examples in my mind of that being the case, but not just dual targeting, but also multi-targeting. So for example, the Rogue, their CC, as it's been seen in stream so far, is Smoke and Mirrors, but Smoke and Mirrors is actually becoming a higher level version of the ability. So the initial version you get is Smoke Trick, which is a single target CC, and then you can graduate into Smoke and Mirrors, which is actually a multi-target CC where you're able to target up to 2 targets at once to use that ability on. So that's just one example of yes, dual targeting, where you can have an offensive and defensive target at the same time, and abilities that actually key off of both of those. And then also multi-targeting, where you can pre-select multiple targets at once and use abilities that affect all of those selected targets.
I misunderstood that too. I think as in tanks, he used as a kind of to generate hate, and I think I know what he means now, because as a rogue in Vanguard and even as a psionicist, you can push hate too. So like I could target the mob, do damage, and target a player like a tank and push hate to them as well as a caster or as a rogue.
Yeah. So
that's
that too.
Awesome.
Yeah.
We do have plans, but we just can't go into it in more detail.
It's exciting stuff.
It is. Thank you very much, man. So that concludes our Developer Roundtable. I want to say a big thank you to Chris for taking the time to jump in and sit with me for this. I'm sure you guys appreciate it. We will be back the end of next month with a new developer, which I will keep secret until a little bit closer to the end of that time. But for now, just to say thank you all to everybody who came and showed up. We really appreciate the support. You guys are amazing. A big thank you to Chris. And as a last little kind of a bit of information I want to release for our champions, and you guys are the first to hear this, we're going to actually release this to them as well. So when I upload this, as soon as we're finished now, I'll upload it to the YouTube channel. I'll link it in the VIP subforum, so you guys have immediate access to those who weren't able to listen to it live. I'm also going to link it in the Champions as a bit of a surprise and just explain to them that we're going to let them have a week's early access to it as well, give a little bit back. So then
Nice.
you guys can talk about it between VIP and Champion and have more discussions in the Champion forums and bring those to life, which is something we're going to jump in and chat a little bit more too. So we want to have a little bit more dev inclusion in the Champion forums. So thought I'd let you guys hear that first, just so you know it's not a mistake. And yeah, so feel free after this, once I've uploaded it and linked it in both, go crazy. Just remember, a lot of VIP stuff is still exclusive to you, so no chatting about that in the Champion, but we can definitely talk about the dev roundtables in there. And again, a huge thank you to Chris. That was amazing, man. I really appreciate you coming on board and for all of that information.
Oh, it's my pleasure. It's absolutely awesome to come in and do stuff like this. So thank you guys for listening, and loved it, and can't wait till next time.
Awesome. Thank you guys. See you next month.
See y'all.